What if I told you everything in your wallet is completely worthless? Not metaphorically, I mean literally. Those crisp bills, shiny coins, even the numbers in your bank account. Pure fiction. Welcome to What If Horizons, the podcast that bends reality until it screams for mercy. Today, we're deleting money from existence. Buckle up. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow, and poof, money's gone. Not inflation bad, gone. Not cryptocurrency crashed, gone. Gone, gone. No dollars, no euros, no cryptic Venmo transactions labeled, for you know what. Just air. Your first thought, probably panic. Your second, how do I bribe my cat to love me now? Here's the twist. Money isn't real. It's a shared hallucination, a collective, trust me bro, scrawled on paper. We've all agreed that a rectangle with a dead president's face can be traded for, say, a lifetime supply of avocado toast. But strip that away, and suddenly, society's running on vibes. Let's start with the obvious. Grocery stores. No money means no checkout lines. Do you just take the milk? Does the cashier, now a philosophical zombie, nod solemnly as you cart out 12 artisanal cheeses? Or do we revert to barter, trading pocket lint and half-used lip balms for toilet paper? Spoiler. Your lint collection isn't worth squat. Then there's work. Work, the thing we pretend to love for digits in an app. Without paychecks, do offices become voluntary art communes? Or do bosses start paying in high fives and stale donuts? Great quarterly report, Karen. Here's a participation sticker. Meanwhile, bankers roam the streets, whispering, I used to move imaginary numbers, now I forage for berries. And housing. Forget mortgages. Your landlord can't charge rent, but also can't afford his yacht-shaped panic room. Do we all squat in abandoned McMansions, hosting awkward potlucks with former billionaires? Dave, pass the quinoa. Also, why is your bedroom a gold-plated closet? But here's the kicker. Without money, we might actually improve. No more, I'd donate to charity, but have you seen my espresso habit? No more predatory loans, just predators, literal ones, if we're to hunting for food. Artists create for joy, not algorithms. That guy who won't shut up about his startup. He's now a very passionate mushroom forager. Of course, chaos reigns. Gas stations become Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves, with the last jerrycan. Yet somehow, humanity adapts. We always do. Maybe we rediscover community, or maybe we devolve into tribes worshipping old credit cards as sacred artifacts. Behold, the holy Amex. Its power is declined. So, is a moneyless world utopia or madness? Yes, but before we dive deeper, let's just appreciate that right now, somewhere, a pigeon is sitting on more coins than you'll ever own. Stay tuned. Now let's talk about what happens to your precious morning routine when money evaporates. That coffee you grab on the way to work. Gone. The barista didn't show up because there's no paycheck waiting at the end of the week. Your local coffee shop has transformed into a communal watering hole where people trade skills for caffeine. Want an espresso? Better know how to fix the espresso machine. The office is even weirder. Your boss keeps giving motivational speeches about the new paradigm of contribution-based economy, while secretly hoarding printer paper like it's gold. Meetings now consist of people bartering skills. I'll trade you 1 spreadsheet for 2 PowerPoints. The IT guy has become the most powerful person in the building since he controls the Wi-Fi password. Transportation becomes an adventure. Gas stations are abandoned, so people are riding bicycles they found, or forming carpool gangs based on blood oaths. Public transit still runs, but the drivers only accept interesting stories as payment. That one guy who always talks about his fantasy football team, suddenly he's the richest person on the bus. Food gets interesting. Supermarkets are now giant potluck parties where everyone brings whatever they can grow or make. The organic kale crowd is finally useful, while the people who lived on takeout are learning to identify edible plants the hard way. Restaurants still exist, but the menu changes daily based on what the chef managed to trade for that morning. Healthcare takes a turn. Doctors are still working, but now they get paid in home-cooked meals and handmade gifts. The guy who used to be a pharmaceutical CEO is now growing medicinal herbs in his backyard. People are suddenly very interested in learning first aid when they realize an ambulance ride might cost them their record collection. Education transforms completely. Schools are open, but teachers get to pick their students based on who brings the best gifts. The kid whose parents bake amazing cookies has straight A's, while the others are suddenly very motivated to develop useful skills. Harvard's endowment is worthless, so they're now accepting students who can tell the best jokes. Crime changes in unexpected ways. Bank robbers are confused and unemployed. The new criminals are people who hoard useful items. The guy with a warehouse full of toilet paper is public enemy number one. Police now spend their time mediating disputes over who gets to use the last working lawnmower in the neighborhood. Entertainment becomes wonderfully weird. Movies are made by collectives of people who believe in the project. Musicians perform for food and shelter. That Netflix subscription you loved. It's now a traveling theater group that performs in people's living rooms in exchange for laundry services. The most surprising change: people are talking to each other again. Real conversations, not just transactions. Your worth is no longer measured by your bank account, but by what you can contribute to the community. Of course, this also means your annoying neighbor who won't stop talking about his homemade beer is suddenly important. Let's examine how governments collapse like house of cards when you remove money from the equation. No taxes mean no salaries for politicians. Suddenly being a senator pays about as well as being a professional mime. The White House becomes literal as penniless presidents repaint it themselves to save costs. National armies face an existential crisis. Soldiers realize defending borders pays exactly as much as not defending borders. Generals try paying troops in motivational speeches until someone points out speech giving is now the most common currency. Nuclear missiles gather dust as nobody can afford the electricity bill for launch consoles. Police departments reinvent themselves overnight. Officers now accept homemade pies as bribes, which technically makes law enforcement more honest than before. Crime drops dramatically when thieves realize stolen goods can't buy anything anyway. The most dangerous criminals are now people who insist on enforcing pre-collapse parking regulations. Social services take creative turns. Firefighters still put out fires but require homeowners to tell them an interesting story first. Libraries flourish as one of few institutions that didn't rely on money to begin with. Postal workers switch to an emotional support delivery system. Your letter comes with free life advice handwritten by your mail carrier. International relations get personal. Diplomats can't discuss trade deals, so they settle disputes through dance battles. The United Nations becomes more united as nobody can afford separate translations anymore. Wars are put on hold indefinitely because nobody can fund the catering for peace talks. Local governments thrive in unexpected ways. Mayors now measure success by how many community potlucks they organize. Town halls become actual halls where people share skills instead of argue about zoning laws. Parking meters are repurposed as community art projects measuring nothing but public creativity. National borders soften without currency-based immigration controls. People migrate based on climate and personality matches rather than economic opportunity. That grumpy neighbor you avoid finally moves to Siberia, where his temperament perfectly matches the local culture. Tourism becomes about cultural exchange rather than Instagramming expensive landmarks. The legal system undergoes radical simplification. Judges now settle cases by having both parties arm wrestle. Lawyers either become useful farmers or continue arguing pointlessly for free. Old habits die hard. Prison populations shrink when society realizes feeding people for free is more expensive than not punishing them. Currency collapse reveals surprising truths about value. The once wealthy discover their stock portfolios make excellent kindling. Working class folks find their practical skills suddenly in high demand. That guy who memorized every useless sports statistic, still useless but now admits it freely. What emerges is a patchwork society where local communities matter more than abstract national identities. People cooperate not because they're paid to, but because they finally realize nobody else is coming to save them. It's messy, it's chaotic, and somehow, it's working better than anyone expected. Now let's dive into the wild world of relationships and social dynamics without money. First, dating becomes interesting. Gone are the days of fancy dinners and expensive gifts. Your first date now involves foraging for berries together and seeing who doesn't poison themselves. Romance is measured in hand-picked flowers and well-timed compliments. Marriage proposals take a creative turn. Forget diamond rings. Now it's about who can craft the most heartfelt trinket from recycled materials. That guy who hoarded bottle caps for no reason. Suddenly he's the most eligible bachelor in town. Wedding ceremonies are potluck affairs where guests bring dishes and vows are exchanged over a shared appreciation for homemade bread. Family dynamics shift dramatically. Parents no longer bribe kids with allowance. Now it's all about trading chores for storytelling sessions. Teenagers discover that their rebellious phase is much harder to fund without cash, so they start bartering their way into social status. That kid who can fix bikes. Instant popularity. Friendships become more meaningful when you can't buy your way into social circles. Your value is no longer measured by how many rounds of drinks you can afford but by how good you are at listening or making people laugh. That awkward friend who always tells terrible jokes. Still awkward, but at least now you appreciate the effort. Social media undergoes a radical transformation. Influencers can't monetize their content, so they pivot to sharing actual useful skills. The guy who used to post gym selfies is now teaching people how to build home gyms from scrap wood. Viral challenges involve helping neighbors instead of eating Tide Pods. Community gatherings flourish when there's no price tag attached. Block parties become weekly events where everyone brings something to share. That neighbor who always avoided social interactions. Turns out they're a master at making jam, and suddenly they're the life of the party. Even strangers interact differently. Without money, people are more willing to lend a hand or share what they have. That person who used to cut you off in traffic. Now they're the one helping you push your broken down car to the nearest mechanic. Kindness becomes the default currency. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Without money, some people struggle to find their place in this new system. That coworker who was great at corporate jargon but terrible at actual work. They're now learning to garden, badly. The transition is messy, but it's also revealing who people really are when stripped of financial status. Social hierarchies crumble and rebuild in unexpected ways. The former CEO might now be trading business advice for home repairs, while the janitor who knows how to fix everything is suddenly the most respected person in the community. It's a humbling and equalizing experience for everyone. What emerges is a society where relationships are built on genuine connections rather than financial transactions. People value each other for who they are, not what they have. It's chaotic, it's unpredictable, and it's oddly beautiful. Let's talk about technology in a world where money never existed. First, your smartphone becomes a glorified paperweight. No app stores, no in-game purchases, just the sad realization that your high score in Candy Crush means absolutely nothing anymore. Tech companies collapse overnight when they realize giving things away for free isn't actually a sustainable business model. The internet survives, but barely. Without paid servers, it's maintained by a ragtag group of volunteers who really like cat videos. Websites now operate on an honor system. You want to read an article? Better be ready to trade a useful life hack or at least a decent recipe. Wikipedia becomes the most powerful entity on Earth by default. Social media platforms transform into digital barter boards. That friend who used to post vacation photos now offers fishing lessons in exchange for haircuts. Influencers pivot to actual useful content. How to start fires without matches, which plants won't kill you when eaten, that sort of thing. The like button is replaced with a "I owe you one" button. Tech support becomes the most valuable service overnight. That kid who fixed your printer in 30 seconds. He's now living like a king, trading his skills for home-cooked meals and handmade clothes. Geek Squad vans roam neighborhoods like ice cream trucks, except instead of music they play the Windows startup sound to announce their arrival. Transportation tech regresses wonderfully. Electric cars gather dust when nobody can maintain the charging stations. People rediscover the joy of bicycles, except now they're made from whatever parts people can scavenge. That guy who insisted on driving a vintage car. Suddenly he's the most popular person in town because he actually knows how to fix it. Medical technology takes an interesting turn. Hospitals still exist, but now doctors trade services directly. That MRI machine still works, but the technician might ask you to help paint his house in exchange for a scan. Pharmaceutical companies become community gardens growing actual medicine. Space exploration gets put on indefinite hold when NASA realizes rockets can't be fueled with good intentions. Elon Musk is last seen trying to barter a flamethrower for a sandwich. The International Space Station becomes the world's most expensive Airbnb, if only anyone could figure out how to get there without money. Oddly enough, some technologies flourish. Open source projects become the backbone of society. That obscure Linux distribution nobody used to care about. Now it's powering entire towns. People share knowledge freely because there's literally no reason not to. The hacker ethic becomes the default way of life. What emerges is a strange mix of high and low tech, advanced knowledge being applied in simple, practical ways. The focus shifts from flashy gadgets to things that actually improve daily life. It's less shiny, but somehow more human. Now let's explore what happens to the arts and entertainment in a moneyless world. First, Hollywood collapses faster than a poorly constructed movie set. Blockbuster films are replaced by community theater productions where the special effects consist of someone shaking a flashlight to simulate lightning. That Oscar on your shelf, now just a very fancy paperweight. Musicians find new ways to share their talents. Concerts become impromptu gatherings in parks where the audience pays in homemade snacks. That indie band you loved, they're now performing in your living room in exchange for a place to sleep. The concept of selling out disappears because there's literally nothing to sell. Art galleries transform into collaborative spaces where anyone can contribute. That abstract painting you made in high school, suddenly it's hanging next to what used to be $1 million Picasso. Art critics now trade their reviews for cups of tea and the occasional muffin. Writers adapt quickly. Books are handwritten and passed around like precious treasures. That novel you've been working on for years, now it's being read aloud at community gatherings where people trade stories for food and shelter. Libraries become the heart of every town, filled with both books and the people who love them. Dance becomes a universal language. Flash mobs replace protests as people express their frustrations through carefully choreographed routines. That ballet dancer you admired, now teaching kids in the park in exchange for fresh vegetables. Dance floors are everywhere, from abandoned warehouses to open fields. Film festivals become community events where people project movies onto the sides of buildings. That obscure foreign film you wanted to watch, now playing on a bedsheet hung between two trees, with the director personally narrating the subtitles. Popcorn is made over open fires, and everyone brings their own blanket. Video games take a nostalgic turn. Without expensive consoles, people rediscover the joy of simple games like tag and hide and seek. That gaming console you spent hundreds on, now a very fancy doorstop. Gamers trade tips and tricks instead of in-game currency, and LAN parties make a triumphant return. Theater thrives in unexpected ways. Broadway becomes a series of street performances where the audience pays in laughter and applause. That Shakespeare play you studied in school, now being performed in a park with costumes made from old curtains and props scavenged from trash bins. What emerges is a vibrant, grassroots culture where creativity flourishes without the constraints of commercial success. Art becomes a shared experience rather than a commodity. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's beautifully human. Let's turn our attention to education in a world without money. Schools don't disappear, they just become very different. That Ivy League degree you worked so hard for, now just a fancy piece of paper that might come in handy if you run out of kindling. Education becomes about sharing knowledge rather than accumulating credentials. Teachers become the most respected members of society. Without salaries, they trade lessons for goods and services. That math teacher who used to bore you to tears, now they're trading algebra lessons for fresh bread and homemade jam. The phrase, "those who can't do, teach," becomes meaningless because everyone is doing and teaching. Classrooms transform into community hubs. Students of all ages gather to learn everything from basic literacy to advanced skills. That kid who used to skip school, now showing up every day because they discovered they're really good at teaching others how to fix bikes. The school bell is replaced by the sound of laughter and the occasional goat wandering in. Curriculum becomes practical and flexible. Gone are the standardized tests and rigid schedules. Instead, students learn what they need to survive and thrive in their communities. That history lesson about ancient Rome now includes a hands-on workshop on how to build aqueducts from scrap materials. Higher education takes a creative turn. Universities become centers of innovation where people exchange ideas and skills. That PhD in philosophy, now being used to teach critical thinking to anyone willing to trade a few hours of gardening help. Research projects are funded by community support rather than grants. Libraries become the heart of every town. Books are shared freely, and librarians are the gatekeepers of knowledge. That dusty old encyclopedia set, now the most valuable resource in the community. Storytime sessions are packed with people of all ages, eager to learn and share. Online education flourishes in unexpected ways. Without the need for expensive subscriptions, people create and share courses freely. That YouTube tutorial you watched once, now part of a vast network of free knowledge where anyone can learn anything. The internet becomes a true global classroom. What emerges is a system where education is accessible to all, regardless of background or financial status. People learn because they want to, not because they have to. It's chaotic, it's unpredictable, and it's incredibly empowering. Now let's talk about sports and recreation in this strange new moneyless reality. Professional athletes have the biggest adjustment to make. That quarterback who threw passes for $30 million a season. Now he throws cabbages to hungry villagers from his farm cart. Turns out his spiral isn't quite as impressive when tomatoes are involved. The Olympics undergo the most extreme makeover. Without sponsors or broadcast rights, it returns to its roots, naked Greeks running in circles, minus the naked part. The new Olympic village is just an actual village that happens to have good running water. Gymnasts now perform routines on repurposed playground equipment using mattresses bought with the last of someone's cash reserves before money disappeared. Local sports flourish in unexpected ways. Soccer games spring up in every open field with balls made of tied-together rags. The rules get flexible when referees aren't getting paid. That controversial offside call is now settled by whoever brings the best post-game snacks. Street basketball courts become the new power centers of neighborhoods. Win a game, gain social status. Fitness culture takes a practical turn. Gyms convert to community work centers where exercise comes through actually useful labor. That weight machine collecting dust in your basement, now repurposed as an efficient clothes wringer. CrossFit becomes moving your neighbor's furniture up 5 flights of stairs, functional strength at its finest. Outdoor activities thrive when gear isn't locked behind paywalls. Hiking trails multiply as people rediscover the joy of simply walking places. That expensive kayak you never used, now the neighborhood shared transportation vessel. Just remember to return it before Frank goes fishing on Tuesdays. Public parks transform into adventure playgrounds with obstacles built from found materials. Sports fandom evolves past team allegiances. Without merchandise sales and ticket revenues, cheering becomes a purely emotional activity. That die-hard rival fan you used to argue with, now they're just the person who shares their homemade pretzels during games. Fantasy leagues are replaced by actual leagues where neighbors compete in locally relevant skills like vegetable growing and tool repair. Extreme sports become more about necessity than thrill-seeking. Parkour is just getting to work on time when all the bikes are taken. Skateboarding transforms into the most efficient way to transport goods downhill. That daredevil who used to climb skyscrapers, now the most in-demand roof repair specialist in town. What emerges is a world where movement and play are woven into daily life rather than monetized experiences. Competition still exists, but cooperation matters more. The playing field has never been more level, even if that field is just an empty parking lot with chalk-drawn boundaries. Let's examine how international relations transform when money can't grease the wheels of diplomacy. First, embassies realize they can't afford to be snobby anymore when their expense accounts vanish. That 5-star ambassadorial residence, now a community center where diplomats compete in who can make the best dumplings for cultural exchange events. Trade agreements become radically simple. Instead of complex treaties full of loopholes, deals are made over shared meals where each side brings what they have. That long-running dispute about fishing rights, solved when both sides realize fishing is more fun when done together. Import-export documents are replaced by thank you notes carried by travelers. Military alliances dissolve into book clubs. NATO transforms into the neighborhood arts and theater organization where former generals perform Shakespeare in the park. Nuclear disarmament happens spontaneously when countries realize maintaining bombs requires resources better spent on actual useful things like baking ovens. Border crossings become welcoming events rather than security checkpoints. That gruff customs officer who used to stamp passports, now the guy who hands out maps to the best fruit trees along your route. Visas are granted based on how interesting your story is rather than your bank statements. The United Nations building becomes the world's largest hostel and skills exchange center. Security Council meetings now feature potluck dinners where resolutions are passed by who brings the best dessert. The veto power is replaced by the universal right to say, "I don't feel like discussing this right now." Foreign aid takes on genuine meaning. Instead of dumping excess grain on developing nations, communities directly connect to share knowledge and resources. That tractor sitting unused in Iowa, now being driven by a farmer in Kenya who's teaching villagers how to maintain it in exchange for local farming wisdom. Cultural exchange happens organically when tourism isn't driven by luxurious resorts. That Parisian cafe worker who used to sigh at tourists, now enthusiastically teaching French phrases to visitors in exchange for learning about their homelands. The Eiffel Tower becomes a giant community message board where people pin notes about their travels and skills. Prestige projects like Olympic stadiums and space programs become community efforts. That abandoned Olympic swimming pool in Rio, now a thriving aquaculture farm feeding the neighborhood. The International Space Station turns into the ultimate pen pal program where astronauts exchange handwritten letters with school children via the most elaborate pulley system ever devised. What emerges is a world where connection replaces competition. Without monetary incentives, countries rediscover what truly matters: shared humanity. Conflicts still exist, but solutions are crafted through conversation rather than economic pressure. The language barrier remains, but breaking bread becomes a universal dialect. Let's wrap up our journey through this moneyless world by looking at the most surprising outcome: happiness. Without price tags defining value, people rediscover the simple joys that got lost in the financial noise. That morning coffee tastes better when it's brewed from beans your neighbor grew and traded for your homemade bread. Work becomes meaningful when it's not just about the paycheck. That soul-crushing office job you used to have, replaced by contributing to projects you actually care about. The barista who hated making pumpkin spice lattes is now the town's most beloved baker. People wake up excited because their labor directly improves their community. Stress levels plummet when keeping up with the Joneses means keeping up with their vegetable harvest rather than their car upgrades. That anxiety about bills and debt, gone, replaced by the very manageable stress of remembering whose turn it is to milk the community goat. Creativity explodes when art isn't constrained by marketability. That novel you never wrote because it wouldn't sell, now serialized on repurposed billboards for everyone to enjoy. The musician who used to play covers for tips now composes symphonies performed in public squares. Most importantly, human connections deepen. Without financial transactions mediating every relationship, people see each other as complex individuals rather than economic units. That lonely elderly neighbor, now the most sought-after storyteller at community gatherings. The quiet teenager, turns out to be an amazing teacher when given the chance. This isn't to say everything is perfect. Some days you really miss chocolate, or air conditioning, or not having to negotiate every single interaction. But overall, people report feeling more alive, more connected, and more purposeful than they ever did in the money-driven world. So what do you think? Could humanity thrive without money? Would you trade convenience for community? Comfort for meaning? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this thought experiment, don't forget to subscribe to What If Horizons for more mind-bending scenarios. Share this episode with someone who needs to imagine a different way of living. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.